बुझिन्छ कुरा? बुझिन्छ बुझ्दैन? सुत्नु भएको छ? सुत्नु भएको छ गरेर हैन? And only 6% of the households live in rented houses. That's a striking difference. Striking difference between the urban and the rural. What is this striking difference? That there is a great gap or difference in the percentage of owned and rented. Owned and rented, here you can have a look. The difference is only how much? 17%. But here look at the difference. The difference of the difference is too much. Right? Yeah. Only 2% of the families spend their life without owning and renting or renting houses and renting. How many? 2%. 2% do not have their home or do not rent also. So that's the first paragraph. It does not explain each and everything. 3% in the urban area do not have either, do not rent or own a house. 40% do not rent. 50% do not have. 50%, 57% own a house. Does not explain like that. How is it going? How is it making an interpretation? How is it doing it? How is the interpretation done? By sleeping in the class? No, right? You do not need to explain each and every number. That is another thing to keep in mind. Whenever you make an interpretation, you do not mention all the numbers. Alright? All the numbers, right? 40% this, 33% this, 57% this, 6% this, 2% this, 92% this. You do not say that. You make a comparison to make it more readable, to make it more understandable. Numbers are already there. What's the point in having again the same numbers here? Of course, you need to use some numbers. केही नम्बरहरुको प्रयोग त गर्नु पर्यो तर जतिखेर पनि के नगर्ने 80% यहाँ बस्दा रहेछ 80% के हुँदो रहेछ 80% के हुँदो रहेछ भनेर नभन्ने कम्पेयर गर्ने कम्पेयर अब कसरी गर्छ ल हैन On the contrary, 57% families have their own houses and 40% of families live in rented houses in town areas. In town areas, it's talking about how people live in the town areas. Because I have already mentioned, there are numbers that are already mentioned here, 92%, 6%, 2%. Here I would write it a bit differently. मैले यहाँ चाहिँ अलि फरक तरिकाले लेख्थे मैले के लेख्थे भन्दाखेरिमा What's the difference? The difference, the only difference, the half of the, almost a little more than half of the families in the town live or own a house. More than, a little more than
50%.
A half. Rather than saying 50%, you can write it a half. That's the trick. That's the way to do it. And here what you can do is 40% can be written as a little less than a half. Alright? Or 17%. What's the difference between 40 and 57? 17%, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yes.
The difference between the number of families living in owned house or families owning a house and those who rent house in the urban area is less by 17%. Less by 17%. 17% comes where?
In urban.
No, 17% less. What is 17% less? The number of people living in rented house. The number of families living in rented house is 17% less than the number of people
Living in own house.
living in their own self-owned house, right? More than one third. Here, that's interesting. More than one third. How much is one third? How much is one third? 1 by 3. One third is 1 over 3. That is how much. What's the percentage? One third is what percentage? One third. Tell me, Raja. One third is how many percentage? What percentage is one third? One third is 33.33. One third is 33.33%. So, what is it trying to say? Let's have a look. More than one third of families stay in rented house in the cities. What percentage of the people live in the rented house in the cities? 40%. So it is saying more than one third. 40% is more than one third, right? Another way of saying the same thing. Instead of giving a specific number 40%, you can say also more than one third, a little more than one third, right? More than one third. If you want to say 25%, let's say, what can you say?
Less than 150.
It's not more than 1/5. Oh, it's more than 1/5. True, more than 1/5. More than 1/5 because 150 is 20%, right?
1/4.
But 25% is 1/4, exact 1/4. That is better. 1/4 वाला सकिन्छ कि सकिदैन? ओ यसरी नम्बरको ठाउँमा नम्बरलाई लगभग रिप्रेजेन्ट गर्ने वर्डहरु फेला पार्नु पर्यो. 50% छ भने सुत्न भएन, हाफ भन्नु पर्यो उमेश क्लासमा. And similarly, 3% of the urban families do not have their own houses, and they do not stay in rented houses either. Either means either भनेको न त. 3% urban families of the urban families, सहरमा बस्ने 3% familiesहरु के गर्दा रहन्छन्? They do not have their own houses, nor do they rent either. के पनि गर्दैन, न त के गर्छन्? So what is happening in the second paragraph? So the first paragraph is introduction. The first paragraph is introduction. The second paragraph is comparison. के गरिएको छ? On the contrary भनेर युज गरेको छ नि. On the contrary. On the contrary भनेको. On the contrary भनेको. On the contrary लाई नेपालीमा के भनिन्छ? तर त्यसको बावजुद भन्न खोजेको. On the contrary. त्यसको opposite भन्न खोजेको. Opposite to something. Contrary means opposite of something. Contrary. Third ma explanation अझै अनि then closing. हो के न?
Yes.
Oh. Summary just. Right? So, comparing the rural and urban areas, the number of house owners is less in town than in the villages. If you compare, again, there is furthermore comparison. In the third paragraph also, there is still comparison. What's the comparison? Rural urban areas ma ke racha? Comparing the rural and urban areas, the number of house owners is less in towns. Number of house owners is? Actually, it's not the number, it's the percentage of the house owners. Right? Percentage of the house owners in
Urban town area.
the number of house owners is less in towns. House owners को
पर्सेन्ट
के अरे सहरमा हाउस ओनरहरूको पर्सेन्टेज के छ? ओनरहरू कम छन् हो क्या पर्सेन्टेजको हिसाबमा है पर्सेन्टेजको हिसाबमा बिकज द पपुलेसन अफ मेट्रोपोलिटन अर सिटी is always high. So even when you calculate in terms of number, smaller percentage can be bigger number. Alright. But there is a big gap between urban and rural areas where families rent houses. So there is a big gap between the urban and rural areas. So if you look at the number of people or the percentage of people renting here and number of people renting here, the gap is huge. What is the gap? The gap भनेको के हो? The difference. Gap means the difference. What's the difference? It's 34%. That's a huge number, right? And lastly, the percentage of the families who live in rented houses is more than 6 times in the urban areas than the rural areas. The percentage of families who live in rented houses is more than 6 times in the urban areas than rural areas. Can you check, compare the numbers? Six. This is 6%, right? In rural area, 6% of the people live in rented houses, and here 40. So how many times is 40 of 6? More than 6 times. 6 times 6 is 36. 40% is 40 is little more than 6. So you see, here this is also important. More than 6 times. So if you want to compare 6 and 40, 40 is more than 6 times of 6. What did I say? 40 is more than 6 times 6. 40 is
more than 6 times 6.
6 times 6. So that's the reason why. So here, the number of families renting in the rural area